What's the oh my God, I didn't know this moment that happens the most often?
GST is the number one question we get. It's the number one source of claims against realtors in British Columbia. I enter into a pre-sale contract. I flip it prior to closing. I make a buck. There's GST on that buck, period. My intention was more the business purpose. Then I am considered to be a builder under the Excise Tax Act, and GST would be payable again.
Are they having a whole lot of conversations with people that are not being able to close on those pre-sales bought 3 years ago?
We get an awful lot of phone calls on what's going to happen if I don't close. People seem to have this perception that the developer will take the deposit and I get to walk away. And that's not the case at all.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
Welcome back to the show. This week's guest is Tony Spagnuolo. He's a real estate lawyer in BC. And we were just talking about this offline, Tony. You're the first lawyer we've ever had on the show. And Steve, my question to you is, what the heck took us so long? Did everyone say no until Tony said yes? How did this happen?
Well, what happened is, just so everybody has a little bit of background before we ask Tony all about himself and about the market and the craziness that's going on out there, is Tony is what we call in the office here a conveyance lawyer, a real estate lawyer. So a lot of our transactions, when a buyer or seller is looking to convey the title, we'll refer them out, and Tony's one of the people on our list that we refer to. But the real reason he sticks in my mind so much is because every once in a while, I don't even think there's a schedule to it, but I'll get an email at like Thursday morning at 8:30 in the morning or something, and it'll be like, this announcement was made yesterday, or there's something new happening, or we saw this horror story come across our desk here in the office and we're seeing it repetitively. So you agents out there, be ready for this. And maybe up to 5 or 6 of those emails have turned into videos on my channel, actually. So it's just somebody I thought that our audience would appreciate hearing from. And if I know anything about real estate lawyers, I know they have the best horror stories of any of us. So, Tony, welcome to the show. I want to know from your point of view, you can do an intro for yourself if you like, but I just want to know what someone in your position right now is thinking of the current state of the marketplace.
Yeah, and I get asked that question a lot. We all do in the industry. And thank you for having me on. I'm honored to be the first lawyer. I know you asked 10 others, and I'd love I'd love to know who those are so I can rub it in and say I was the first and they missed out. But so thank you. I'm looking forward to the next hour conversation. The market, and I think about this all the time, actually. We have an office of 40 staff, and we're a real estate high volume law firm. We live and die by real estate. So I guess right now my mood is cautious optimism, planning for what we have now, hoping it gets a little better. So at the start of the year, I remember when I do my budgets every kind of January, and we had a really good November, December, January, and I thought, okay, here we go. And I kind of projected a 10% increase on the MLS stats, which translates to X more files for us and that kind of stuff. And then February hit, and we slowed down. So now I'm kind of predicting or budgeting for just a small decrease from last year's numbers, and just getting by that way. So there's still enough business to go around. I find these markets are. I was just talking. Both my boys are lawyers in the office, and we were having a little coffee yesterday. And I say, this is when the good habits are formed in markets like this. If you stick to the plan, stick to the marketing, and understand, whatever it is that you need to do, I think we're going to bounce back really well when the market turns. But it's a long-winded way of saying cautious optimism. Ask the lawyer a question, you get a 5-minute answer. Sorry.
It's perfect for a podcast.
55 minutes to go.
We'll get there. Steve, what's next?
So you kind of maybe answered it there a little bit. I was wondering, are you noticing, because I think our sales data, at least in the Fraser Valley, is down 25% year-to-date sales. So obviously, though, you don't necessarily just do MLS transactions. You're doing all sorts of transactions, may even include estates and pre-sales and that sort of stuff. So do you figure you're only down about 10%? So that means you're possibly stealing some market share out there, or how busy are you compared to previous years?
Well, we're not as busy, but so what we do in our office, I measure the number of deals that we do on a monthly basis and compare that to the MLS stats for the
Mm.
Greater Vancouver board and the Fraser Valley board. And I bet what's our percent of the market. It's not an accurate number at all. There's a lot of distortion in it, but it's the same inaccuracies every month. And I've got that data going back to 2007. So I could tell you our market share for any month from actually maybe 2010, but our market share is growing in this market. We're getting more. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Our purchase and sale stuff is down. There's no doubt. But we do a lot of private lending, a lot of mortgage
Mm.
investment corp business, and that stuff is going well. I think in markets like this, people don't trust anybody to get the deal done. They want a lawyer who's got the experience and the staff and the horsepower. They don't want to trust it to someone's cousin's barber's best friend who's a family lawyer to get the deal done. We act for some developers on their closings, so we can talk about pre-sales later. That's one of the topics I know we'll get to. And that stuff is still coming along. So our market share is going well. So that tells me our firm is doing well. We're getting a bigger piece of a smaller pie. So we keep sticking with it and doing the emails that Steve mentioned and answering the questions and being responsive and providing great service. And our market share goes up. And then when the pie gets bigger, we're gonna kill it.
So when you talk about, kind of mixed stuff, or that's private lending. So are you seeing then people in tougher spots where they need to go to private lending because maybe the trend is going away from larger, more conventional banks and conventional mortgages because people are in tough, or why are they looking at these alternate lending methods?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, banks are getting tighter and tighter with their lending criteria. Brokers are having a harder time finding financing for a variety of reasons. Might be new to Canada, might be self-employed, might be bruised credit or things like that. So we don't. It's not really private lending. These are very big mortgage investment corps. Some of them are pushing close to $1 billion now.
Mm.
They're big entities, and there's a variety of people. And it could be people with credit card debt, but it could be developers that need just a little bridge loan to get them through the next 12 months. It could be someone going through a divorce and they're just short right now. Their history has been great. They got some equity in their property. So it's not necessarily a sign of people in distress, although there's always been some part of that business. I hope I didn't offend any of my mid clients right there, but I'm
Hey,
sure they will.
I'm
They'll let
invested
me
in
know.
mix. Mix are a great thing, and they are very useful for a lot of people. I think they're actually um, kind of misrepresented. Like, a lot of people think that mix are there for the people that shouldn't really be buying real estate, but really, a lot of the time, those mortgage investment corps are there um, to find a solution. Of which it could be something as simple, like you say, cash flow. You got a project closing in 3 months, and you need the money in a month. That sort of situation. So I think they do get kind of demonized. But most of the guys, I know a lot of guys that are invested in mortgage investment corps, and they kind of do well for everybody. They're very expensive lending. But if you have an opportunity, or if you need a way to bridge the gap, I mean, I think
What's the
they're really
interest
good.
rate? What's the interest rate on that right now? If you've got to
Well,
lend,
I don't really pay attention to the details of each file, but I get
right?
the email marketing blitzes from not only our mix, but our mixed competitors. And I've seen stuff as low as 6.5%.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And we've seen some real expensive people are really in trouble. It's kind of more in the corporate world where it could be 12 to 14%,
Right.
but they fill a need. I mean, even one of your clients who's buying today, their sale got delayed for a month. Well, they don't have the sale proceeds coming in, so they need a bridge loan, and the bank won't give it to them. So they're an important part of the market. There's no doubt about it. I'm not just saying that's this important part of my business, uh, but it's an important. There's a real need out there for them.
Do you think those are then mostly towards the commercial side and towards the development side rather than end users, or are you seeing end users getting in trouble because they have to borrow, again, this either MIC money or private money?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's certainly a large part in the commercial side. We do more of the residential stuff. The downtown firms kind of do the corporate stuff, and they charge accordingly. But we don't. we get instructions from our MIC to prepare some paper. We send it over to the borrower's lawyer. We don't know what the circumstances are behind that. We don't know if it's a credit card problem, a divorce problem, they lost their job. Maybe their kids signed up for an academy in hockey and they need 50 grand. Like, who knows what it is? So I really can't answer that question. But again, it's not just people who shouldn't be buying. There's a need for these companies out there.
With the market changing so much recently, and we know the sales data is down. In my business, I'm going to knock on wood here because I've been selling real estate for 12 years. I've never had a firm transaction not close. Like, I've had extensions and stuff that are up to the minute, but I've never had something fall apart and lawsuits and 3 years of back and forth. In your business right now, is that happening, or are most people getting to closing and finding ways to close? And I'm not even talking about pre-con. We'll get to that whole can of worms. I'm just talking about typical resale property. Is there anything up to the wire here, whether you're representing the seller or the buyer, where something happens like we can no longer do that? And what's the next step? Is it always, because some buyers believe, oh, I'll just walk away from my deposit. It's not that simple. It's probably cheaper to close and resell the property than walk away from your deposit and pay for all the other things. So can you walk me through, like, is that happening right now?
No, we're not seeing any of that. But then again, by the time we get the contract, there's a purchase and sale that's been negotiated, a contract that's been negotiated. Residential real estate's very emotional. It's not commercial. What's the square footage? What's the mortgage payment? What's the rent? What's the cap rate and away you go? It's cold-blooded in a sense. Whereas residential, I love the kitchen, wanting the kids in the school, whatever. You guys know that more than I do. So by the time we get the paper, both sides have made the emotional commitment. Somebody wants to buy, somebody wants to sell. Rarely, I don't know if any of our deals have not closed in the last year or two, and if they have, no more than in the past. So by the time they get to us, the seller wants their money, the buyer wants that house, and they're ready to go. Now, there are extensions, there are issues for sure, and we're going to talk about some of that. It could be a mortgage financing problem, whatever. But we have not noticed any increase in the number of deals not closing.
I've heard of situations in our market, and this isn't my active clients, thank goodness, but it's where, like, somebody bought something before selling, and the person they bought from had a private mortgage that was up for renewal, and the renewal fees, like, they asked for 3%. I think it got down to like 1%. And then the people that can't sell their place that need to close on this are asking for an extension on the guy that has the private. It's just this whole domino effect of, like, if this doesn't all come together, it's bad for everybody involved.
Oh, absolutely. And we stick handle those all the time. And there's almost always a way to figure out. It may cost one client a bit more in fees and whatever, whether it's lending fees or legal fees or whatever, but those deals get done. And actually, one of the things on my list, and my screen's already gone dark here, is back-to-back closings. Like, if you're a seller or buyer and you want to sell your house today and close on the same day on a purchase, that's fraught with risk. Because you need the money from your sale. If there's any kind of delay in that sale, if the buyer just needs a 1-day extension for some reason, now you're in jeopardy on your purchase. So, the domino effect can be real. There's no doubt about it.
And because if that happens, then you can't close on the purchase that day. You still have a firm binding agreement on the purchase that isn't contingent on the other money not coming through on time, right? Like, those are separate things.
Absolutely. And we've seen this, I guess I'll jump ahead here. We've seen this where we've got like 3 to 4 back-to-backs. Well, so now if you're the fourth buyer, you need the first 3 purchase and sales to go through smoothly and all on the same day, and then get to yours. Just expect a nightmare. Like, it just be ready to close without the sale proceeds. Maybe you're going to a MIC, or you're going to your parents or a friend or something, because you can pretty well assume that there's no way those 3 deals are going to close that day ahead of you, and all the money is going to change hands so that last deal can close. So back-to-backs are a real problem. It was the biggest thing when I emailed my staff yesterday afternoon about topics for today. That was consistent amongst everybody. We're back-to-backs. And the other one is closings on a long weekend, especially if you're the buyer. Well, actually both, because Monday's the holiday. It closes Friday. Well, the deal closes, but there's a little hiccup and the money doesn't change hands. You still got to give the keys on Saturday. And that's
Okay.
always an issue. You give the keys without the money and there's a little horse trading going on. So long
Mhm.
weekends back to backs, be really careful. And we understand, lawyers understand that back to backs sometimes have to happen. There's a
Mhm.
really good reason. It just can't be avoided. Well, then send a note to your law firm saying, look, I know I'm not supposed to do this. We had to do it. Here's the reason why. Best of luck.
We have some in that have happened to us where it's and maybe this is too inside baseball, but I think some viewers will know what I'm talking about. So you sell the property first, right? You need the funds from that property, but sometimes in Toronto the deposit is larger than the total commissions paid out. So there's a return to vendor check, but they need that money now, this day, and that's like a 2 business day thing, and then that becomes a thing. I learned my lesson on that in year 2 of the industry. I was like, that is never going to happen again. We're going to figure that out. Should anyone be closing on a Friday if they're a buyer, or is that just risky? Never. Like,
well, it's typically the seller who doesn't want to close because the buyer sends the money to the seller's lawyer. The seller's lawyer gets it to the bank. Now, if they don't get it to the bank by 3 p.m., interest is charged to the next business day. So again, there's very little chance that's going to happen by 3 p.m. So now the seller is paying interest on, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Some of these mortgages are quite large. The per diem could be $50 a day, $100 a day. Well, there's $400 in extra per diem interest. So as a seller, to save some money, you want it on the Thursday, not the Friday.
Maybe I'll speak to, so most people, Tony, that listen to this are end users, and a lot of the realtors that listen to this are very new. As we know, I think like 30 or 40% of our realtors are, since the pandemic, have been licensed. So the problem, Tom, maybe you can jump in when things differ from Ontario, because I know they're very different in Alberta. But here, when we take the real estate course, they tell us don't do we have 3 dates. We have completion, which is the day the money changes hands. We have possession, which is the day you get the keys, and the adjustments day, which is the days that things like strata fees and property taxes, everything is adjusted for. So usually the last 2 dates are the same day. But the course teaches you don't put possession and completion on the same day. Do it one day after the other. So every realtor that has no experience on writing deals does them Wednesday and Thursday, or Thursday and Friday, or Friday and Saturday. But then they don't stop and think, well, where's the person going to go that I'm buying the house from? Because they're in the house. So if you're negotiating a proper deal, it is not hard to get the right dates. And I'm sure Tony's probably lost some of the hair on his head as a result of just this topic. This is probably your biggest.
Well, that's a cheap shot right there.
Hey, I'm saying
look who's talking.
I'm just saying the reason for it. I'm not saying if it is or isn't happening. But
Hey agents, a clean and easy to manage real estate website is a must. Go to realtyninja.com/Tom right now and start your site totally for free and pay nothing until you launch. And then when it is your time to go live, you will save 20% off of your entire first year just for signing up at realtyninja.com/Tom.
It's really easy to negotiate. I'm going to close on my sale on Wednesday. I'm going to close on my purchase on Thursday. I'm going to get keys for my purchase on Saturday to give that guy 24 hours. And I'm going to give the keys for my sale on Sunday. So like stagger it out. What is this idea that people need to go one day after the other? And then you have 2 people arguing in the driveway because maybe the seller's not out in time. Now, does it work that way in Toronto, Tom? Or how does it work? Does everybody just go to mom's house for the night in Toronto?
There is one date. Closing, possession, that is all one date. There is one date on the contract. That's when the funds transfer. I think legally on our APS, it says 6 p.m. is the time in which you actually, like that's like on every agreement. But there is one date and that's it. And you work around it. It's very clear though. Yeah, we don't have key date the next day.
Walk us West Coasters through how painful is that every single time when something goes wrong on closing or somebody doesn't move out on time?
I mean, luckily we haven't had too many like major issues. Once in a while, the buyer shows up and the seller's still there and they're like 6 p.m. I'm like, yeah, but the funds transferred, but the agreement said 6 p.m. So that's happened a little bit. We try our best not to do buy and sell on the same day. Usually we'll stagger it by one day. But the actual answer is, where do they go? Sometimes they get the moving truck the night before, load it up, park it overnight somewhere, and stay in a hotel. Like, that's actually the answer. Because we have one date. There's one date that it transfers. And at least in my market in Toronto, typically the transactions close. And Tony, you can tell me how this is different, between 3 and 4 p.m. It's rare I get like an 11 a.m. email saying like, hey, funds are transferred, we're good to go. It's always the afternoon.
It's certainly more common because often it's because we're waiting for the mortgage proceeds from the bank. So we can close the deal early, but then you phone a bank. I won't pick on anybody in particular, but okay, we got the deal done, put the money in our account. Now you're waiting. And then you call the seller's lawyer. We got the money, come get it. And they got to send a courier, or we do a direct transfer of some sort.
Right.
Well, now that
I got to get more swag on here. Sorry, I'm getting.
Get it in there. Hey, send them over to us. We'll drink them on air.
All right, I will. And let me make a
note. So now that we've made the official determination that British Columbia is definitely better than Ontario, how are you keeping up with, I want to say since 2018, like new regulations seemingly coming in 2 to 3 times per month? What are you doing to stay on top of this? And then which one of these, thousands of regulations that seem to have been brought in by this government are you finding is the biggest hang up continuously in your transactions?
That is the reason I'm losing my hair. It's got nothing to do with the other comments. It's a challenge, and it's getting harder and harder. And thankfully, we have a great team in the office. There's 40 staff here. 9 of them are lawyers, and each has their specific role. And they're really great at advising me on these things. It's not like I sit and read the regulations and the legislation anymore. We've got other smarter lawyers that can do that for me and summarize it. And then, away we go. So, but it's a challenge. And what I always say, and, I do a lot of speaking at realtor offices and things like that. It's only going to get worse. Like, it never gets easier. You both have been in business for a while. I've been doing this since 1990, for God's sakes, 35 years. It never become easier. A file's never got easier. The paperwork's never got less. The regulations have never been eliminated. We have things, even with our law society, that were relevant in 1993, 94, 95. They're not relevant. We still got to comply with it because no one goes through that and says, what can we eliminate? So that's the challenge. I mean, as a realtor, as a lawyer, we have regulatory changes, you have market changes, and then you're building your own brand, whether it's a podcast or an email blast or social media. Like, we are business owners, and keeping up with that stuff is a challenge. And that, I think, and you talked earlier about new realtors, that I think is what differentiates the good with the bad. And I'm going to throw a lot of realtors under the bus here. A lot of realtors shouldn't be realtors. They're not professional. They don't get it. They don't put in the time. And it's so easy to get a license and so easy to keep their license. And I know every realtor and every broker, every manager will agree with that, but no one will say it in public. And I just did. So I guess
you can say it. We would kind of get in trouble if we said specifics.
I know, but we see it. But being professional, one of the questions is, what can realtors do? Just be professional, negotiate a proper contract, know about the clearance certificates, know about, in Vancouver, we have an empty homes tax. The rest of the province, we have a spec tax. Know about those things, or at least have, and the best way to do this, I find, and we do this in the office a lot, is we have checklists in our calendars, in our software. We have a checklist. Did we do this, this, and this? And we sometimes tick off not applicable, but if you're a realtor and you get a phone call saying, can you come to my house tomorrow night for a potential listing presentation? Okay, what do I do? What do I need to know? And have a checklist. Yeah, did you order a title search? Yeah. Did I look at it? Yeah. Did I do this? Did I do that? All of that kind of stuff. Now you get to, you're presenting an offer. What's the checklist? What do I need to worry about? Is AML an issue? Know your client, all that kind of stuff. And the only way to really keep on track is by having those checklists and going through them. And after a while, you kind of get the hang of it. But still, most insurance claims against lawyers are for those over 8 years call. because we think we know what we're doing and we just fly by the seat of our pants and we forget one thing, and on this file that comes back to bite us. So it's about having those. That's probably the best advice I could have for realtors, brokers, anyone in business, is have that checklist so you know that you're not missing anything.
I've been saying this for the last little while. Like, I think that big thing, you can know what you're doing, but if you're not good at properly setting expectations for clients, that's where things fall through the cracks. And that kind of takes me to my next question. You know, we'll give the realtors the blame they deserve to a certain point. When the client's at the closing table, or these days, maybe it's the Zoom call or whatever the version that you guys use, because maybe it's not Zoom. What's the like, oh my God, I didn't know this moment that happens the most often? Is it like, wait, what is land transfer tax? Or like, what comes up where it's like, why did my realtor tell me this? What are people missing that they find out the day before closing and go, holy crap?
Yeah, we send out the statement of adjustments to the clients, 24 to 48 hours in advance. And there's a variety of questions. Nothing's really consistent, though. It used to be a lot about first-time buyers. So you can't become a first-time buyer again in British Columbia. I'm talking now about the property transfer tax, the 1, 2, 3, 5% tax that's applicable. If you've ever owned property before as a principal residence, then you cannot become a first-time buyer again. And I think maybe for a while there's CMHC or Genworth, you could become a first-time buyer, but you can't. So you got to pay that tax. And so some realtors were not prepping their clients, and some mortgage brokers should have known that too. So that used to come up. It doesn't come up as much. If it's a seller, if they're a non-resident, this is often an issue. We need a clearance certificate.
Yeah.
We can never provide it prior to closing because it takes, 2 to 4 months, 3 to 5 months. It takes a while to get, and there's never 3 months between subject removal and closing. So we have to withhold a portion of the sale proceeds, typically 25%. Now that's 25% of the sale price, not the equity. So we're going to hold that money back. If there's a mortgage on there, if there's a second mortgage on there, and there's not 25% left over, well, then we got to ask the client to come in with money. So here they are selling the property, thinking they're going to get a bunch. And we're saying, no, we need some money beforehand. We're going to hold it for 3 to 5 months, and then we can release it to you. So that's a non-resident issue, and that comes up often. You really need to know that as the realtor.
Can't it go as high as 50%? If
it's depreciable property and it can be higher, by and large, 25% standard, it could be higher.
And that's just so CRA gets the capital gains and they can confirm everything. That's essentially why it's taken 3 to 5 months to work that all out.
Yeah, well, you're dealing with CRA, and anything with CRA is going to take months. But yeah, because if the seller doesn't pay the appropriate taxes on the sale of that home, the buyer's responsible. And we had a case here a little while ago where the lawyer or notary didn't do their due diligence, and it cost the insurance company $800,000. So now the way the buyer protects himself is by getting a clearance certificate. And so the seller has to provide that to the buyer. That releases the buyer from any obligation. And so every buyer insists upon it. And so that takes time.
Yeah, there are so many regulations. The one you bring up about first-time buyer, I try and tell people that, like in BC, from my understanding, is, you cannot have owned property anywhere in the world to get your first-time buyer. And so there's a lot of people that are coming from overseas that are like, sure, I've never owned property before. But to confuse things, CMHC's term of a first-time buyer is somebody that has not, is it owned or bought property within the last, I think it's owned property or principal residence within the last 4 years. So in a CMHC program, if you're getting some sort of a benefit there, you can re-become a first-time buyer again, even within your own city, as opposed to the British Columbia law. And I think there's a lot of this, particularly around taxation. There's all sorts of different information out there. And I'll give you my favorite is whenever I talk to a pre-con agent, particularly pre-con agents in Ontario, they like to pretend that if you're flipping property, GST isn't payable on the higher price because you've already completed on it once. Yep. And I'm telling people, and we even had on our, we're late to the lawyer game, but we had an accountant on last year, and he was breaking it all down. And like agents reaching out to us, that accountant's wrong. I'm like, hey, from my point of view, GST is payable if it's due no matter what the property, like for instance,
even
vacant
if
land,
it's closed
every time, even if it's closed.
but you haven't
Yeah.
lived there. That's Tony. Is that?
So and I think we got about 35 minutes left. We can probably spend all 35 minutes on GST. It's the number one question we get. I think it's the number one source of claims against realtors in British Columbia. So 2 scenarios. I enter into a pre-sale contract. I flip it prior to closing. I make a buck. There's GST on that buck, period. Assignments. It used to be there was the same rules as when I closed, but it's not. GST is payable on any assignment. Now, that's easy. The hard part, new construction. I buy a condo. I entered the contract 4 years ago. My intention was to live in it. And now circumstances change. Life gets in the way. It's been 4 years. It's a long time. I can no longer live in it. I want to sell. Because my intention was to live in that unit, GST is not payable. Even if, so I close, a day later I want to list it. Because my intention was to move in, GST is not payable on that. Now, if my intention was more of a business purpose, then I am considered to be a builder under the Excise Tax Act, and GST would be payable again. That doesn't mean Ottawa gets the GST twice. Me, being declared a builder, I charge the buyer GST. I deduct what I paid as an input tax credit, and I send the difference to Ottawa. So it goes to the intention of the seller when they bought it. Let me give you a couple extreme examples. Married, 3 kids, live in Burnaby. I buy a studio unit in Abbotsford, which is 45 minutes to the east. Well, the intention of me moving my family into a studio unit 45 minutes away with 3 kids, there's no way. So there, clearly, GST would be payable. I bought that as an investment. I was going to flip it. I was going to rent it. I was going to do something with it. Now, let's say I bought a 3-bedroom condo in Burnaby, the little suburb that I live in. And during those 4 years, all my kids moved out and my wife divorces me and I have a job that transfers me to Kelowna. Well, my intention was to move in. Life got in the way and now I got to sell. So how do we determine that? Only the seller knows. And they need to have a story if they're ever audited by Revenue Canada. So as a realtor, as a listing realtor, you need to dig into that story, find out, make a determination if GST is payable or not, and then write it properly in the contract. So it's a confusing answer. I wish I could say yes or no, or when it is or when it's not, but it's strictly based on the intention of the seller when they entered the pre-sale contract.
So you got to become... Yeah, that makes it actually way worse. I thought we were going to have a clear answer here, and you're like, wait a minute, if you're a good enough liar, then maybe it's not taxable.
Yeah.
So if you're representing the buyer, you're negotiating, you say, okay, you're telling me that GST is not payable. I want a representation and warranty in the contract that says seller warrants GST is not payable, and if it's ever deemed to be payable, it shall be deemed to be included in the price. So if you're the buyer's realtor, that's what you want in there.
Yeah. And thankfully here in BC, I think the BCREA just installed that into their contract this year. So it's like, unless stated otherwise, GST is in the purchase price now in British Columbia on an MLS.
And on this topic and all these other ones we're talking about, and I mentioned this a lot when I'm talking to realtors and brokers.
Hey folks, if you're looking for a real estate agent in the city of Toronto, let's face it, you gotta call my buddy Tom Storey of the Storey team and Royal LePage Signature in Toronto, Ontario. They're your obvious choice because Tom is not just the co-host of this podcast. No, he is a real life and top producing real estate agent in the city of Toronto. There's nobody out there that knows the condo market better than Tom and his team in downtown, but they do service the entire city of Toronto and any of your residential real estate needs. So if you're looking for an agent, do not hesitate to reach out to Tom, book a call with him using the link down below in the description of this podcast, and let Tom guide you through your real estate journey. And now back to the podcast.
What I think every realtor and broker should do is have a relationship with a lawyer that they try and send their business to. And the reason I say that is because there are times when you need a question answered today. Well, by the time I get off this podcast, there's going to be 20 emails and 4 voicemails, and I'm going to listen to them and read them all, and then I'm going to see which ones I'm going to return first. And we all do this. Now, who am I going to return first? Those that I have a relationship with, those that send us business, those, for whatever reason. So you need to have that relationship with your professionals, an appraiser, a broker, as a realtor, a lawyer, a notary, an inspector. So if you need something done, if you have a question on GST, you can call and they'll take the time to help you out and dig into it and give you a more qualified answer than just maybe yes, maybe no.
The apprehension I find, so what we're told to do, and I'm sure in Ontario, Tom, it's probably the same for you, is anytime there is anything outside of our scope, for instance, taxation, building inspections, anything, our go-to default is I have to encourage you or refer you to a professional in that area. But nobody wants to pay for an hour of Tony's time or an accountant or whatever, and they go, we're probably fine. So like that's why realtors cover their butts so much, and it's just often it's either they're too scared or maybe too lazy as the person transacting in real estate to actually go ahead and get that advice, because it might cost them $200 or $300 and they don't think they're going to get sued.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But if that client's coming from a realtor who sends us 25 deals a year, we'll spend an hour with them. That's not a problem. If it's a realtor I've never heard of before, never sent it, they've been around, Tom, I think you said 15 years. You're 15 years in Toronto. I've been a lawyer. I've never seen a deal from you. So why would I spend an hour helping your client? You've never helped me in my business. And now I'm really stepping outside the boundaries of what I should be saying on a public podcast.
No, it's true.
Though.
That's just relationships. So, that makes sense.
Exactly. So that's why, and even if you don't do that much volume, if you just called up your inspector, appraiser, lawyer, whoever it is, and said, look, I'm only doing 4 deals a year. I'm going to try and send you every one. I may have the odd question. Great. That's all it is. Now, if it's a 5-hour answer, that's a little different. But a quick little half hour, 45 minutes, we do that. There's 1 or 2 of my lawyers in the office. That's really their job description, answer those questions.
So they must be getting a lot of calls right now about completions and or lack thereof on pre-sales. Is this a big deal for your office right now? Are they having a whole lot of conversations with people that are not being able to close on those pre-sales bought 3 years ago?
We get an awful lot of phone calls on what's going to happen if I don't close. And people seem to have this perception that the developer will take the deposit and I get to walk away. And that's not the case at all. The developer will take the deposit and then they have a duty to mitigate. They have a duty to relist the property. And if they sell for less than what your purchase price was, they could come after you. Now, will they? It depends on how much money we're talking about. It depends how easy it is to go after you as the consumer. So a lot of the projects here in Vancouver, and I don't have any actual experience in the office, but what I'm hearing is those projects that were sold offshore are in a little bit of trouble because it's harder to sue somebody offshore than it is in Vancouver. Vancouver, we can do a land title search, a car search, and all these other things and find out if there's assets. So most local people close. Offshore is, from what I'm hearing anecdotally, is it's a little different and it's harder to chase them. But you don't just get to walk away from the deposit.
So you're getting those calls though, like you have a whole bunch of people that are like, hey, I just plan on walking away from the deposit. Is that cool? And you go, no, it's not cool. And then so where do you guide them from there? So let's say I'm the one having that conversation and you can either say, hey, I don't want to close, or hey, I cannot close. How does that conversation go? Do you start advising them on what they can do next or which way they should go? Or do you just kind of hang up the phone as soon as possible and say, phone a different law firm?
Well, it depends on who sent them over. No, I'm just joking. So we give them their options. You can not close. Here's what could happen to you. You could be sued. There could be a shortfall. Maybe it's just a deposit. Maybe they're going to sell for just a little bit less. Your deposit covers that and you're good. And nothing further will happen. We don't know. That's up to the developer. So you could walk away with just a deposit. You could get sued for a significant shortfall. What do you want to do? It's the client's choice at that point. And so generally it's you should have a conversation with the sales office, the developer, or you could retain us and we could talk to the developer's lawyer and see what's going to happen. But it's going to be the client's choice. We give the advice, they make the choices.
Mm-hmm.
So we say it could happen this way, it could happen that way. We don't know which way it's going to happen. And it's almost too bad in a sense. We act for a developer that's closing a 355 unit high rise in July. So we'll see if any of those don't close. So give me a call in September and I'll let you know.
Tony's coming back on the show in July.
Yeah, that's my plug for being number 2. I want to be the second one.
You'll be back. Yeah, you'll be back. And because from the developer side of things, like we know a few things are pretty true here. We know that if they sold this 3 years ago, probably upon closing, it's worth less than what the buyer paid. In not all circumstances, but a lot. So if the developer makes it clear and it gets out to the public that they are letting people off just walking away from their deposits, that's not a good thing, because everyone's going to say, well, you let this person, and then it's a real slippery slope. But there's also a difference from a person that's just saying like, I could close, but I'm refusing to close. Sue me if you want. Keep my deposit. Let's see if you do it. Versus like, I can't close right now. I need 3 weeks more to get some private money to make this happen. Are they being nice and working with people? Because in Toronto, I've heard a few horror stories where developers like, we don't care. This is your closing date. This is the contract. Figure it out. And they're not even helping people that are, they're not trying to just walk away and go like, let's see what you got. They're saying like, I'm trying to make this happen. Give me a few extra weeks here.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that we always tell a client when they're entering into a pre-sale is who's the developer and what kind of track record do they have? And I think you find, at least in Vancouver, that the bigger developers who've been around in a while, they don't want to lose a deal. They don't want to go into litigation. So if you need 3 weeks in private financing, they'll work with that client. Now, at some point, you got to, buy or not, let's move on here. But I know that the 3 or 4 developers we act for, they will always try and work with their clients and help them out and get them closed. So if it's a matter of an extension, especially if they can show there's a valid reason, look, I had my wedding date was July 21st. I set the date 2 years ago. You just gave me 10 days notice that the deal closes on the 23rd. My honeymoon's like whatever it is, right?
Right.
But developers also, I mean, I'm pro developer, I'm pro development. But if you went at them and said, look, I lost my job, my health deteriorated, God, whatever, they're going to work with you, and they don't want to be the big bad developer that's going to sue everybody in sight. So they don't want word getting out that they let that person off. But if there's a story there's a health reason, divorce, kids in trouble, whatever it is, I think that some of the bigger developers in town would say, okay, we get it. We'll take the deposit. Away you go.
I had shared this with Steve. We had a lawyer in our market tell us that he heard of one success story where the realtor that helped them buy the pre-con, they could no longer close on that price. They could not make it happen. He went into the sales office and said, hey, here's the situation. We're not getting lawyers involved yet. My guy cannot close on this one. Let's just say it was $1 million purchase. But if you have any left or anything else is trying to give you back at 800,000, we could swap units and he could close on that. So I've heard a few success stories of maybe that's an option for some people listening. I don't know if the developer is going to go for it, but I thought that was an interesting take. Not to take the work away from the lawyers, but maybe the realtor that helped them buy it should be the one going out and trying to find a solution as well, right?
Geez, Tom, lawyers got to eat too, for God's sakes.
So wait a minute. This is not what I was hoping for from a lawyer. You're telling me that it ain't so bad out there? Come on, we got to have some horror stories across.
What's the worst closing story ever?
Well, it's usually the close buying and selling same day.
Okay.
And you're the third person in line, fourth person in line. I mean, there's all kinds of people that can't close today. They can't come until tomorrow, whatever. But it's the closing same day, and people are stuck for accommodations. They're couch surfing with their college friends or whatever it is for a while. Those are the typical horror stories.
Have you ever had anything where, say, for instance, something happened and the bank didn't send funds in time, so you can't close? And then have you ever had it where like maybe a seller goes, well, I don't want to sell anymore because you didn't close today?
No, we certainly have had But again, going back to my earlier point, by the time the deals get to us, people are emotionally invested.
Yeah.
So now it's the day of closing. The buyer signed all the documents. The seller signed all the documents. The seller's probably either cleaned up the house, moved half of their stuff out, and they're in the process. We just need tomorrow because the bank couldn't fund today for some reason. I don't think we've had a single seller say, nope, I want out. Now, that doesn't mean you don't prepare for that and you assume that could happen. And as a realtor, you have to assume that the worst can happen, unfortunately. But we haven't had that happen in our office. I think that's because we're such great lawyers. Clearly.
That's probably it. No, that's it. I think so.
That's why the other 9 lawyers said no. They had those problems.
Let me ask you a question. I bet since you started in 1990, and this is just a guess based on what we've seen trend wise, is that when you're helping people sign for their properties when they bought their first home in 1996, you're probably getting a lot more 20-year-olds buying their first property. And that first time home buyer age has risen to 30, 35, 40 plus, right? That's just naturally happened as prices have gone up and income hasn't stayed. And we could do 10 hours on that topic, but we'll get to that later. My question is, okay, let's say, I'm in my almost mid 30s now, and I have a friend who owns a property that I helped them buy 2 years ago. They are single when they buy it. They start dating someone new. It's going great. 6 months later, they move in together. Okay. And then maybe they're common law at a certain point, or they end up getting married. Is it a 50-50 ownership at that point? Are people signing cohabitation agreements? Like, I know that's probably an awkward conversation in a new relationship, but what are you seeing for that? We didn't buy together, but now we live together. Is this the matrimonial home? On the legal side, what does that all look like?
So I should preface all this by saying I am no family law lawyer.
Sure.
And probably the right kind of lawyer to ask these questions to, but my understanding, this is not legal advice. So I'm very clear here that you should go speak to a family law lawyer if you're in that situation, is that whatever you bring into the relationship is yours. Okay. The gain while you're in the relationship is most likely going to be split.
Got it.
So one of my boys owns a condo, gets married 3 years later. The value of the condo at that time remains his. Our daughter-in-law moves in. This is hypothetical, by the way. Don't want my kids watching this or say, what the hell's going on, Dad? But any gain after that is generally 50-50. There might be some issue of whether that asset's used as a family asset or it's strictly just mine or my kids. Right. But so again, that's a family law question. And I think it's the same with an inheritance. My parents pass, I get a house, and I think that house is mine, but any gain after that, especially if the rent from that or something went into a joint account, I think there's some rules about that. So again, I'm a real estate guy, I'm not a family lawyer. Anyone watching this in that situation, feel free to email me and I can give you the name of a couple family lawyers as a referral. But that's my understanding of it.
You segued into that one perfectly, because I am seeing a ton of this situation right now, and I'll have you comment towards it. How about folks that are getting on in years and they are adding kids to title, and you could have joint tenancy and you could have tenants in common, at least here in BC. I don't know if it's the same in Ontario or not, Tom. But should someone add their kids to title if they're getting on in years? Maybe what are the ramifications if you do versus don't? Because I'm seeing it constantly, and now I'm having to run around and try and locate a child that's out of town, child being a 50 or 60-year-old person that lives out of town that now is an owner on this property. And they're like, well, they don't really have to sign off on that property, do they? I just put them on title 10 years ago.
Yeah. No, a great question. And this comes up a lot. And I think I'm getting to the age where my parents and my aunts and uncles and my buddies' parents and aunts and uncles are all getting to the, 80, 85, and they got a house in Vancouver worth $3 million and it's going to go to the 3 kids. So if the property stays in the parents' name and they pass, okay, the property is going to go to the kids' names, but there has to be a probate for that. And probate in BC, I can't speak to Ontario, Tom, but probate takes months.
Same.
And it's incredibly expensive. On a $3 million house, it's generally 1.4% of the value of the estate. Well, on $3 million, that's $42,000 just in probate fees, plus 4 months or 5 months or whatever the time is. So a way to avoid that, and I've done this with my parents, and I've done this with lots of people. I've also not done it with people, so we'll talk about the pros and cons.
Do you need insurance? The answer to that question is obviously yes, of course you do. Whether you are a tenant, landlord, or homeowner, you need to insure your property and belongings. And when I insure my investment property, personally, I choose Square One. Square One is affordable online insurance for everyone. If you apply for your Square One insurance policy using the link in the description of the show notes, listeners of The Tom Storey Show can receive $20 off right now, simply by going to squareone.ca/The Tom Storey Show. Square One is no joke. I personally use Square One for my landlord policy on my investment condo. I picked Square One because they were easier to work with than other insurance companies. And when I had an issue with my previous policy coverage in relation to my Strata's coverage, Square One was the insurance company that came up with a solution for my insurance problem at an affordable rate. Online quotes take less than 5 minutes with Square One. Get your home insurance quote today at squareone.ca/The Tom Storey Show and save $20.
Is my mom, she won't be watching this podcast, so I can share this with you. We added my brother and I to title to her house. So assuming my mom passes first, she's 85 years old on Saturday. Happy birthday, Mom, in case you are going to watch this. When she passes first, or if she does, we take the death certificate, we file it, and now the property goes into the names of my brother and I in an afternoon. No probate fees, no hassle, no bother. We can list the house tomorrow. So it saves a lot of time and money. Now, there are reasons why you don't want to do it. My mom lost control of her house in the sense that if she wants to put on a reverse mortgage and go travel the world, she has to get my brother and I to sign. Now, being Italian, we only move 5 minutes away from my mom, but there's some people who move across the country. Now you got to get them to sign in Toronto or wherever it may be. So you lose some control if she wants to sell the property. Well, she can't without the permission of my brother and I. So you lose some control. Maybe I'm in business for myself. Maybe I get sued. Maybe that's an asset that's open to creditors.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I've got an addiction problem. I don't. But maybe I got an addiction problem and I'm going to waste it all that way. So there's times you don't want to do it. We generally recommend doing this. My mom's 85, as I mentioned. Her travel days are done. We live really close. It made sense. But if there's any other kinds of things like that, maybe you don't. So this is where, let me get to that in a sec. You also need a trust declaration. Because my mom lives 5 more years, 10 more years, and there's another $300,000 capital gain or appreciation of the property. My brother and I don't want to pay tax on that. So we do a trust declaration that says, even though my brother and I are on title with my mom, we're not the beneficial owners. We are the registered owners. We only did this for estate planning purposes. So all of the rights, benefits, liabilities flow through to my mom. Okay. And if my mom's worried about being able to sell it, we could also do some other documents as well. And this is why, as realtors, you just need to know that that's an option that works for some people. Now you say, go talk to your lawyer about this because it may not work for you. There's no property transfer tax in British Columbia if we transfer a principal residence between family members.
Okay.
Family members is up, down. So grandparent, parent, child. I can't transfer property from me to my brother or me to my 94 cousin. So there's no property transfer tax. We get it done. It's quick. It's easy. It works in our scenario. If there's investment properties, there is property transfer tax payable. There's an issue about income tax, but we can avoid that with the trust declaration. But we just have an Excel spreadsheet. We plug in the estate and we show clients the value, the savings of probate versus not. The minimum savings we've seen so far is 9, and we've seen up to $72,000 in savings in probate fees and hassles in doing that kind of procedure.
But that trust agreement is important there because otherwise you're going to have a potential massive capital gain on the part of the child that's been signed on. So that may be the part that I've seen maybe either missing or maybe the lawyers that did that for them or notaries or whoever didn't necessarily recommend that. And that's good to know, actually. I didn't know that as well, so I appreciate that.
And as a realtor, you're going into a listing, and it's an elderly person, and there's a power of attorney. So the son or daughter or whoever has the right to sign documents. So you use that power of attorney. But if that elderly person is in ill health, and we've seen this, I just got a phone call 3 weeks ago from a realtor where the seller died during the listing process. It may have been even after the contract was entered into, but closing hasn't occurred. Well, the power of attorney dies when the person dies. It's no longer valid. They can no longer use that power of attorney. Again, in British Columbia, I don't know, Tom, about Ontario. So what we've said to clients in that situation is, well, if you, not to ask you how sick you are, how bad you are, but if there's any chance, why not add your kids to title now? Why not put your brother or your kids on there now? Sorry, I'm trying to get the middle of the screen here. I'm going all over the place. I lost my bearings. So that if something were to happen prior to closing, no problem, right? So again, using my mom as an example, you went there for the listing. She's on title by herself. I got power of attorney. Well, by putting my brother and I on, if she were to pass during that process, no problem. File a death certificate. We're going to do one this afternoon for a friend of mine whose dad died. Tomorrow they can list the property or they can go ahead and sell it. No problem. So it makes a lot of sense in some situations.
To clarify, though, that would have to be on as joint tenants and not as tenants in common to make sure that you go on as the 100% owner, or I guess you would call it the survivorship owner instead of the partial owner. So that would be, I guess, the difference there. Now, I guess this is the first time I've ever seen this because I'm actually on your email list, as I said at the beginning. We don't do prep for this show, but you actually sent out an email yesterday and said, hey, I'm going on the world famous Tom Storey Show tomorrow. And what is it that you, as either realtors or whoever's on your client database, wants to know? Did you get any responses? And then was there any theme in those responses from any of those folks? And I appreciate you doing prep that we refuse to do.
Well, I want to make sure I'm invited back. Yeah, I keep looking over here because my screen goes dark, but I've got 5 pages of questions, and we've covered a lot of it. And I'm just going to scroll through, but hang on a sec here.
Yeah, no worries.
Is this my best side? Am I okay?
Yeah, you look good. You look good.
Okay.
Anything's better than looking at Steve. So
yeah, fair enough. So we talked about GST, we talked about family planning, estate planning, that kind of stuff. The importance of a title search. Steve, I know you're on the service called Terra Firma, and complete disclosure, Terra Firma is a company that I own. But I think every realtor, when you're looking at a title search and there's an easement or a covenant, in particular here in British Columbia, because the province now has this small scale multi-unit housing thing going on where almost any lot, you could put 4 homes, 6 homes, 8 homes, depending on how close you are to transit and some other variables. But we have these covenants on title. And there's actually a lawsuit that's going to court today. They're starting U.S. Supreme Court about a property in Squamish where there's an old covenant from 1959 that says this has to be a single family neighborhood. And that's totally contradictory to the provincial legislation. So we'll see what the judge decides in that case. But as a homeowner, and I know most of your viewers are homeowners, but even as realtors, you need to pull the title, review it, pull the easements, pull the covenants, pull the rights of ways, all those things, and show that to your client. Now, you could do that yourself and explain it to the client, but now you're incurring money and all that, or you can get your lawyer in order to do it, or you can use a service like Terra Firma, which I know Steve's on and does that. Yep. Those are charges that run with the land. They're there forever. I have an easement on the back of my property that says I can't put anything of a permanent nature in the back 12 feet. I'm Italian. I want to put concrete there. I can't. It's of a permanent nature. So I had to put in fake turf. Like, what the heck? But the good news is I got rid of the tomato garden, so that's fine. But so I can't stress that enough. And even if you're showing that to the client, it's oftentimes we'll see there's an the client signed a letter, a HELOC, a home equity line of credit at the bank, and they think, oh, it's just a line of credit. No, it's a mortgage on title. Or they borrowed money 20 years ago from their aunt, and then they never thought of a discharge. The best party I ever went to was a mortgage discharge party. It was my uncle's. He was in a band playing the sax and the drums. It was great. And he grabbed the mortgage discharge and put it in the fireplace, and we all had a toast. That was the discharge. No one filed it at the land title office. So we had to go back and redo it. So that comes up. These duplicate titles could be there. So pay attention to that title search. And as a buyer, you want to know what that easement says, what that covenant says, what that right of way says, because that affects the use of your property. So, that came up a lot. The obviously day-to-day closings came up. Title insurance is a big deal now. If you're getting a mortgage, I think every lender, certainly almost every lender, will insist on a policy of title insurance, which protects the lender for a number of things, the biggest being fraud. And fraud is becoming more and more of an issue. There's been a lot of that in Ontario. That's where all the criminals are, right, Steve? All the good people are in Vancouver.
Of course.
There's been a lot of mortgage fraud. And so lenders are worried about that. And I'll throw lawyers under the bus. There's been a lot of lawyer fraud. And so title insurance protects the lenders for that. For an extra $50, the homeowner can be protected. We insist every one of our clients gets that. We don't even give them a choice. The lender policy is $200. You're paying $250 because $50 is also for you. So now you're protected in case someone commits fraud, or there's an easement, or your property encroaches, or there never was a building permit issue, or there's unpaid strata fees, things like that. So that's kind of it's not that new anymore. It's about 8 to 10 years old in a big way, but it happens on every purchase, and people should know about that.
Does it work the same way in BC that when you're at the closing table, the lawyer will say to you, if you're buying a property with a mortgage, and this isn't mortgage insurance, like you put less than 20% down insurance, but it's like we'll pay the mortgage if you pass away or critical illness or something. Is that something that you legally have to say, hey, we have to tell you about this, would you like it or not? And are people saying yes or no more of the time on that?
If the bank sends it over, we show it to the client. If the bank doesn't, we don't have an obligation to do it, but some banks will say, please ask them if they want life insurance. In our experience, most people don't do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not an insurance person at all. And I know some mortgage brokers will sell that, and there's some really good policies out there. My concern has always been, if I have a mortgage with Royal Bank for 5 years, and I have an insurance policy with Royal Bank Insurance, and now I switch to TD, do I need to get it? And at some point, I'm going to get older, despite the hair, I'm not there yet, and I'm not going to be in decent shape, and my insurance goes up. Whereas if I just go buy a 30-year insurance policy, I'm covered for the 30 years.
Right.
But I know there's some new policies out there. I'm going back in my experience, but there's newer insurance policies out there. And I know there's brokers who are doing it, some brokerage agencies, and apparently those are really good products. I haven't delved into why or not.
In my experience at my personal closings that I've actually gone and been the client, I've basically been looked across the table and say, I'm showing you this. And then kind of like, we don't really recommend it. And I've always just said no.
Yeah,
but it's a quick conversation.
Separate life insurance is way better than mortgage insurance. Don't buy that.
Well, I didn't think about learning more about that before this, but I know I've talked to some brokers. They know this is better because, and I forget what the because was. So maybe next time you have a mortgage broker on, you can ask that question.
Because they make more money. Tom, I want to wrap this up because we are near the end of our hour. I appreciate all of your time. I will say I had a very good belly laugh there about the concrete at the back of your lot and I'll tell you why. I have a neighbor that's of East Indian background, and he, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, was telling me how jealous all of the East Indian guys are of how much concrete Italians have on their property. So that's why I had such a good laugh. I will say Tom usually asks me if I have any final thoughts before the end, and I do have a final thought. It came to me quite some time ago. I'm sorry to hear, Tony, that your mom won't be listening or watching. I thought she would, but she won't be. My mom also won't be, but I do know Tom's mom.
My mom listens.
Mrs. Storey. I appreciate you watching or listening all the way to the end. I very much appreciate it.
Maybe you should be very proud of your son.
Yeah, and put in a good word for Tony and my mom to maybe check it out once in a while.
Well, Tony, that hour went by actually very, very quickly. That was, I hope you will come back if we ask again. I think that was great. Quick question to wrap things up. That email that you send out, is that just to realtors? Like, can somebody get on your email list that's listening to this? Like, we can get it after for you and put it in the description of this video. Who does that go to?
That goes to every realtor, broker, developer that we've worked with who's given us permission to add them to our email list. So if it's one of your listeners or watchers that wants to get on it, they can email me. I'm not sure if you put my contact info.
We'll get it in there. We'll get it.
Anything you send us will be linked below. You bet.
Okay. And then we're happy to add. It's generally not geared towards consumers. It's more the regulations and that stuff. Sure. We also have a past client email list. It's probably 25,000 people on there, but we don't want to bombard them bi-weekly like we bombard realtors. So that's kind of like 2-3 times a year kind of thing. And then our social channels, which one of these days we're going to get good at. We're not there yet. And that will have updates as well. So there's a variety of ways to learn about this stuff.
Yeah, and I'll give you one last plug, and maybe it's a plug for myself too, because we do use your service to check titles. So we appreciate that. So when you list your property with us here at Macdonald Realty, and specifically my team, we will do all the research via Tony about your property and the charges to keep you out of real estate jail after the transaction's over. So all included in our fee.
And thank you for using the service.
You bet.
Well, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, everybody who watched and listened to this week's podcast. We will see you next week, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Tony.